Marietta, California. Okay, good deal. Now, we're going to go back to September 7th, 1996. I have a question for you as far as for Kevin Gaines. Can you let us know, in your personal opinion, did Kevin Gaines have anything to do with any element of September 7th?
I firmly believe so. I absolutely believe so. Kevin Gaines was on administrative discipline during that time. He was he had been caught. I believe the story goes that he had been caught calling 911 on himself due to a domestic situation, and they put him on a desk job. He was supposed to be at a desk in in Los Angeles during that whole week of September. Not only was he not on that desk job, but he was in Vegas when he wasn't supposed to be, 3 days prior and a few days after Tupac's death. To me, that's a giant red flag. And the fact that he was killed about a year later by Frank Liga speaks amounts to me. Because we have to keep in mind, Kevin Gaines was Sharifa Knight's lover. He was there was an instance where they had raided Kevin Gaines' house, and Sharifa Knight was in bed with him. So that is proven. So if you want, I personally believe that Sharifa Knight and Reggie Wright Jr. Set this up, got the wheels in motion to do a hit on Suge. And I firmly believe that with the appearance of Kevin Gaines in Las Vegas, that Kevin Gaines there's a high probability that he was involved with the murder. And if you look at what happened to Kevin Gaines shortly after the Tupac murder, that it further goes to solidify what dirty cops will do to get rid of people that are involved.
But in what capacity do you say Kevin Gaines played? I mean, in your opinion, if he had to narrow down his participation in it, what was he? Was he a lookout? Was he a source of information? What exactly do you think he was?
Well, I view Kevin Gaines as Sharifa's inside man. Now, if we point this at Sharifa and Reggie Wright Jr., Reggie Wright Jr. has his inside people. Sharifa Knight is going to have her inside people. So if you go by the letter, the confession letter, the patent letter, it says that there were spotters at different checkpoints. I think at the very least, circumstantial evidence would go to show that Kevin Gaines, at the very least, was probably one of those spotters in Las Vegas. There has been no timeline or account given because of his early murder of why he was there, what he was doing there, and in what capacity he was there as. So I think at the very least, in my opinion, he would be a spotter, if not someone sitting directly in the car. And
Okay, perfect.
not to interrupt you, but it's a high probability that that voice that came over the radio that said got him was Kevin Gaines.
Very interesting. So, do you think that Frank Liga killing Kevin Gaines had any?
I got a buddy named Derwin Henderson. Anybody know Derwin? Sergeant Derwin Henderson, the little fucking stroop there. Wannabe boxer. Derwin. He thinks he's a ghetto boxer. He's a sergeant now, but he was a boxer on the boxing team, and he'd wear fucking ripped shit and hooded stuff, and all tore up like he was a ghetto kid. Derwin and his buddy Kevin Gaines were best friends and running partners. That's how Gaines knew who I was, basically. Henderson was a probationer of mine, and I'd seen them one night in Hollywood. And remember, I had long hair, driving a fucking Buick Regal, and I'd seen Henderson in traffic, and we stopped nose faced. I was going south, he was going north. He had another male black in the car with him, but I didn't pay attention to that guy. I was talking to Derwin. We were partners, and I was saying hi to him and talking to him. Turns out Gaines was with him. They were running partners. That's where Gaines knew me. But after I shot him, Henderson and about 30 other people went out to the scene in North Hollywood and canvassed the area.
You think that was a sanctioned hit by LAPD, or do you think it was just a random shooting and Frank Liga didn't know who Kevin Gaines was?
I would have to go towards sanction hit. Frank Liga has since came out a few years ago and said that not only the official story that he told to Russ Poole was that he didn't know who it was. The guy was throwing gang signs and he saw a gun and he shot him. Well, years later, Frank Liga admitted that he had met Kevin Gaines before. He did know that he was a cop, and if there were more people in the car with him, that more the better, that he would have been happy killing more people. So I think that Frank Liga kind of hangs himself on his own rope when he came out and admitted he knew who Kevin Gaines was. Now that changes the narrative. If Frank Liga knew who Kevin Gaines was, then he knew he was a cop, and then he wouldn't have known he was a gangbanger. So that makes his story not make any sense. I think Frank Liga knew exactly who Kevin Gaines was, and I deduced that by his own words.
Do you think Suge Knight had any kind of do you think Suge Knight had any association with Frank Liga?
I can't prove that, but what I can point to is there was a tip, an informant tip to Russell Poole concerning Kevin Gaines while he was still alive. And what this confidential informant, I believe his name was Mike Soto, to be honest with you, but what he said is Kevin Gaines' job at Death Row Records was to oversee and be a lookout on cocaine transactions, on drug transactions, that he would be the lookout, make sure that they weren't bothered by police, and he would set up places that they could do drug exchanges. Now, as far as Suge Knight's knowledge of Kevin Gaines, I believe that Suge Knight, and you can look at what's going on with Suge Knight today, I believe that Suge Knight knew exactly what Kevin Gaines was doing at Death Row Records and concerning the drugs. But I think it's that same knowledge that Suge Knight has is the same reason that they're trying to bury him today. Because like I've said before many, many times, some of the people that were lieutenants or rookie officers are now sergeants in the LAPD. And it was a couple weeks ago that LAPD cops were caught smuggling drugs from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, which means that they're still doing the old games that they were doing in 1996, as well as people like Reggie Wright Jr. So I hope I didn't convolute that answer, but as far as Suge's knowledge of Kevin Gaines, I think that Suge knew that he was a dirty cop on the payroll, but I think that Suge was sheltered from any knowledge of what happened before, during, and after the hit on him.
Okay. Gotcha.
Because I believe ultimately that the shooting on September 7th in Vegas was an attempt on Suge Knight's life.
Well, speaking of cops, and when I carry on with speaking with cops, I know that there was an interview on another station. I'm not going to say any names, but there was a mention of a police officer who was, because Greg Kading has come out in the past and said that there wasn't, or there's been very little. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was zero to none police officers who worked for Death Row Records that were LAPD. And in the interview on this other station, this, I don't want to say any names. I don't want to say his name, but he mentions Rich McCauley as being one of the police officers that was there. When he was talking, he said Rich McCauley was there that night. Then he stops and goes into his recollection and says that no, he wasn't there. Any reason why you believe he would do that? I mean, how you would think that he was there and not there? Is that because it goes against Greg Kading's statement that there was no LAPD officers that work for Death Row Records?
The basis of the allegations against you was that there were LAPD officers working for Death Row Records. How many LAPD officers were working for Death Row Records?
Throughout my time of having the company, which was like from 1995, I guess until presently, but let's just say during the Death Row time, 1999 or something like that. I think there was two. One was a Rich McCauley, and the second was a guy by the name of David Love. Were the two, but David Love probably only worked it once or twice. I know he was working the night of the incident with the Made Niggas video shoot. I know he worked that video shoot, but he never did any bodyguard details. But I had two LAPD officers that ever worked for me.
Been allegations that LAPD officers were in Vegas that night. Is that true?
Rich McCauley was. He later became a sergeant with LAPD, but he was one of the ones. But he was there that night. You know what? I'm not going to even say. I don't know if he was assigned to the club if he was there that night, but I know he was one of the ones that worked the detail that whole week of outside of the door, Tupac while he was fighting for his life.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think when it comes to, I believe we're talking about Reggie right now, right? I believe when it comes to him that he tends to say things before he thinks them through. And if with Reggie admitting that there are police officers there, even one, then that, like you said, it goes against what Greg Kading has said in Murder Rap. And I find it very interesting if you watch the Fox special or any subsequent specials after that, but specifically the Fox special, when asked if Reggie Wright Jr. knew David Mack or Rafael Perez, he said no. But when he said those were Suge's boys, but when they got Suge Knight on the phone, he threw Reggie Wright Jr. right under the bus and said those guys worked for Reggie. So I think the whole Greg Kading Murder Rap narrative that there were 0 cops involved with Death Row Records or working for Death Row Records has been completely blown the F out of the water just by the police documents that Russell Poole had. There are countless documents, whether it be Kenneth Knox, confidential informants that say off-duty police were working for Death Row Records. And what you have to keep in mind, off-duty police are not ex-cops, they are current cops that are working a side job. So yeah, I think that Reggie caught himself on that and doesn't want to go against the grain because him and Greg Kading, I mean, let's just put it this way. Would you go against a narrative that clears you and your fellow police officers of any wrongdoing? I mean, I would back Murder Rap too if it cleared me in the murder of Biggie. And I think that's what people are missing, is the connection between Reggie Wright Jr. and the murder of the Notorious B.I.G.
Well, let me tell you, there's always that code of blue, code of honor, where police don't tell on each other, and we know it's out there. It's not some fable that exists. It's the real deal. Police do not tell on each other, and I'll pretty much leave it at that. Are there any pictures, any photos of David Mack and Rafael Perez with anybody from Death Row? I mean, has there anybody that had pictures out there?
I haven't personally seen any, but I think a good lead, because I know you investigate, would be Simone Green. Simone Green was Death Row's photographer. And I believe that if there are pictures out there, I haven't identified them, but what I think is telling is when they finally raided David Mack's home for a bank robbery, they found a whole shrine to Tupac and pictures of him in red suits hanging out with people from Death Row. So I think that David Mack personally had those pictures, and if I'm recalling right, I do believe that there's a picture of David Mack in a red suit standing right next to a Death Row associate that was in Simone Green's book, Time Served, My Life at Death Row Records.
Gotcha. All right. Is David Mack, is he still out there? Is he hiding? What is he up to these days? Any word on David Mack, or even, we know Rafael Perez, we know he's driving limos out in California, giving rides to Harvey Weinstein's daughter and of course Harvey Weinstein. But David Mack, any information on David Mack?
I have absolutely zero information on the whereabouts of David Mack. I would love to find David Mack, but I attribute David Mack to one of those people like Trevon Lane. And a lot of people think that Trevon Lane just doesn't speak for, he doesn't want to talk about Death Row. I think that Trevon Lane is one of the smartest people in the world, because I believe he knows what's up, and people that know what's up, they're not going to be talking. I think that's why I think David Mack has made himself inaccessible for that, the very same reason that Trevon Lane has.
What about Amir Muhammad? Any information on Amir Muhammad?
Amir Muhammad, Harry Billups, he's still out there. He has a LinkedIn profile. You can look up. You can look up Harry Billups on LinkedIn. So he's out there still doing his thing. But getting him to talk is like pulling nails.
Don't you find it interesting that out of all the people and all the witnesses that were there that night at the wing, was at the Peterson Museum, that nobody has ever really come out except for Greg Kading and the other person that mentioned, Wardell Pucci Faust, that No one's ever identified Wardell as being the shooter, but you have several witnesses that have identified Amir Muhammad as being the person that was there that night and the person that they seen um, near that SS Impala. Don't you find that kind of interesting?
No, I find it completely interesting. I believe that Greg Kading. Let me go into the spiel here just for a second. Gene Deal, who I've talked to and I still have an unreleased interview with, Gene Deal holds firm to this day that he saw Amir Muhammad, and that is the person who did the shooting. Gene Deal would be the equivalent of Gaddafi being the eyewitness in the Tupac Shakur killing. Gene Deal was there. Gene Deal saw and identified Amir Muhammad and has accused Greg Kading several times of misrepresenting his statements. To give you a backstory of why I believe that Greg Kading goes the Poochie Faust route is the task force that was built up, the murder rap task force that was built up, was due based directly because Valletta Wallace was suing the Los Angeles Police Department for the wrongful death of her son. When the task force was set up, it was in response to this lawsuit from Valletta Wallace. Now the thing is Greg Kading was put on this task force along with a bunch of other cops who were disciplined. These were cops that had disciplinary reports in their file, so it's like the D League. But the thing about their task force is they were not allowed to see any of the documents that were related to the Wallace lawsuit. And these documents are the documents that deal with Amir Muhammad. So Greg Kading comes out and he says he does this thorough investigation. Yet he was barred from looking at documents that had to do with Valletta Wallace's claims that off-duty police officers were acting with death row records to have her son killed. So I think that it's very funny that there's a lot of criticism on Battle for Compton and the patent letter, but nobody ever criticizes where he got Wardell Poochie Faust's name from, which was a letter Roderick Reed wrote to Kevin Hackey. And he's never shown that letter publicly, and there's a reason for that. That letter says Reggie Wright Jr. and Death Row Police in it probably 10 or 12 times, and then one line about Poochie Faust. So for everybody out there very critical of the patent letter because of the half deadline, I implore you, and maybe hell we'll post it, the letter from Roderick Reed that Greg Kading uses to point the finger at Poochie Faust also points the finger at Reggie Wright Jr.
Okay, perfect. You put it perfectly. So, would you be in agreement that David Mack, Rafael Perez, and Kevin Gaines were all friends?
Yes, I would say that there's an association between those three, yes.
Okay, okay. So we're going here, and this has actually been a very interesting conversation, and we're just kind of carrying along. I don't want to get tied up too long in these conversations, but speaking on Reggie Wright Jr., was there you had the interview with him? Was there anything in the interview that you felt like that you didn't get to ask Reggie that you would certainly like to ask again if he had the opportunity to?
Oh, of course. Hindsight always being 2020. Let me preamble by saying, people said I didn't have time to prep and all that, but I knew about the interview about 2 days before it happened. I was given a text message about 15 minutes before go time telling me what time it was happening. I'm writing notes like crazy. In hindsight, I would have pushed him harder about the death row chain. I would have asked him about David Mack and Rafael Perez. But the problem with an Ask Me Anything is I wanted to ask the important questions and get as much as I could on record. It's kind of like RJ Bond says, if I would have hammered him about the chain, then we would have had an hour and a half conversation about that specific thing that he stated. So yes, and of course there's questions I would have liked to ask him. I would have liked to ask him about Suge's comments that David Mack and Rafael Perez were working directly for Reggie Wright Jr. I would have pressed him harder about the chain. But I think that I did what I seeked out to do, which was just to get him for the first time in 20 years to provide a timeline of where he was and what he was doing the night that Tupac was shot.
Do you feel like he kind of danced around some of your questions, especially about the whole chain incident, that you'd asked him about the chain incident, and he kind of danced around that a little bit?
Yeah, I think Reggie was well prepared for that. Reggie, unbeknownst to me, Reggie had been watching our live streams quite a bit. So I think he knew our talking points. And if you notice, and there's other people that have interviewed Reggie too, if you notice in a Reggie Wright Jr. interview, you can ask him a direct question, and then 20 minutes later, he's talking about five other different things. So every time you get a point, like a point counterpoint in a real debate, um, by the time that you have the counterpoint, he's already moved on to five separate issues. I've said before, and I'll say it again. He robbed me of the chance to ask him, "Did you have anything to do with the death of Tupac?" Because he, in the start of the interview, he's like, "I didn't have nothing to do with Tupac," and then he filibusters. And I'm not playing armchair quarterback. I've said publicly, I think I could have probably done a better job about it. But the thing about interviewing Reggie Wright Jr. is you're never going to get him to give you a precise answer. He's going to talk over you. He's going to, just like I said, filibuster, and he's never going to give you a simple yes or no.
Okay, got you. Yeah, I have to admit that it was to me it was a decent interview. He did a good job on it. I mean, it's really hard to kind of go through it, and I mean everybody has time to prepare for it. So I mean, it just seemed like some questions just got danced around on. But moving on to the next topic of discussion that's been pretty hot here in the last few days, few weeks, or whatnot. Tupac Shakur and the life theory and this whole Malik Shakur thing that's been taking place. What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I'll start with the alive theory. I think that there's a lot of people, just out of sheer respect and love for Tupac, that would absolutely love to think that he's still alive or that he might come back just because they have so much love and respect for him. When it comes to friends and family of Tupac, you can tell there's, like, even in the Daryl Harper interview I did, he got pretty emotional when talking about Tupac. When you talk to the people that knew Tupac well, his friends and his family, there's unequivocally not a doubt in your mind that Tupac is gone. Um, the Malik Shakur situation. I want to point out as a preamble to what I'm about to say is Shakur is not a real last name. Shakur is like Malcolm X. He gave himself the last name X because he didn't know his real name because of a slave name. Now the Panthers would also do this as well, and that's where the name Shakur comes from. And anybody can call themselves Shakur. I mean, Tupac's last name really wasn't Shakur. And I think that with the Malik situation is, if you're going to interview someone that says that they were Tupac's family or that they knew Tupac, and they're going to make those kind of claims, you had better damn well vet those people. Because if you have never heard of this guy, to give him a platform like that to say that the things he did about Afeni and other people, I think is reckless and irresponsible. I called it out very, very early that Malik Shakur was probably a fraud and reaching out, and I'm not the